into music?
I don't know that I'm into music as much as I'm into punk rock. Um, because I really didn't care about it until then. Like I didn't have that 70s rock background. I mean, I tried to care about it when I was like before I figured it out, like when I was like maybe 12 or 13, somewhere in there, to kind of fit in or whatever, because that never worked regardless of, of what I was doing. Um, I mean, I had like singles that my mom had, like Fats Domino and the Everly Brothers and Elvis, of course, and Jerry Lee Lewis and stuff like that that I would listen to on the stereo at home. But until I found punk rock, I didn't really care about music. Didn't mean anything to me. And that was basically through Skateboarder magazine in the 70s. So you'd read interviews with people like Tony Alva that people have probably heard of at least, and Brad Bowman, Steve Olson, Dwayne Peters. All these guys would talk about it, and I was like, man, this sounds really cool. And and when the Sex Pistols came to the States, there was a story on NBC about them. I remember seeing it and thinking, man, that looks cool, whatever that is. Like that intrigued me. And my dad also, well, he was a printer, so I would get copies of Rolling Stone before they even hit the street. I mean, literally from the printing press to home. So, and I remember there being an article about punk rock. I want to say it was probably 78 or 79. And there was a review. I can't remember if it was a review or just they talked about in the article about Stiff Fingers. And I'd never heard Stiff Fingers at this point, but they described them as the singer having gargled with broken glass and razor blades. And I was like, oh, this sounds, these are my people. Like I somehow intuitively knew this is what I wanted to hear. This is what I was interested in. And not long after that, college radio stations started playing punk rock and new wave. So it was all basically the same thing. And that's, really where I heard it. You know, as the replacement song says, the left end of the dial. That's where I heard it. The Flow Valley station, Florissant Valley had a station that was all new wave all the time, and they had specific punk rock shows. And Umsel station had a show on Saturday night, Pipeline, and there was even the Lindenwood station had a show too, and WashU station had one, but you could barely hear it. But that was my introduction, probably 79 or 80, when I finally heard punk rock.
Jumping out of it, just got to get it. Gonna skate breath to breath. Jumping out of it, just got to get it. Gonna skate breath to breath. Breath to breath. Breath to breath. Breath to breath.
You formed Ultraman in 1985. Was that your first musical project?
Ultraman was 86, like April 86, like right after the first band that me and Rob Wagner had. It just basically morphed into that band. I mean, it was starting a new band, but some of the songs carried over, like Egg Boy, Continuous Arc, The Game. I forget there was another one too. They carried over. I mean, two of those songs are on the first album, and The Game, I think, is on Non-Existence. But that band was called White Suburban Youth. That that band really started. I mean, the band existed a long time before we ever played our first show. That was we started like the end of '82 when Rob was a senior. The radio station, the high school we went to had a radio station. We went to Rittner, and it had a radio station. So we'd both worked on it, and I graduated in '82. So for whatever reason, Rob bought a guitar and decided that we should start a band. And once I got in high school by like 81, 82, there were I mean, literally a handful of people like that cared about punk rock that were at the radio station. So Rob and another guy that worked on a radio station that I'd known since junior high, and a guy that I knew from skating. He had moved back from Maryland that summer of '82, and the four of us started a band. We didn't really know what we were doing, obviously. Rob taught himself how to play guitar with the Mel Bay thing. And by summer of '83, we were rehearsing like all the time and we probably had 20 songs at that point. And Rob was like, yeah, one day we'll play Mississippi Nights. I was like, all right. And the other thing he said too, I think I said this another somebody else recently, was that we were listening to like one of those Mystic compilations with like, 100 bands on it. He's like, we're already better than most of the bands on this compilation. I was like, all right, well, if you say so, I'll take your word for it. But a year later, we did play Mississippi Nights. We opened for this band called MIA. It missed like August of '84. So yeah, 40 years ago last month. But our first show was at the Bernard Pub with the Offenders, and that's the one that was raided by the Vice Squad, and 36 kids got arrested, and that whole thing. Made the
Right.
newspaper with our first show.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So so as you said, it ended up just morphing into Ultraman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember the specifics of how or why. Because I was very linear and very resistant to change usually. I mean, I can and would, but it took some time, because right around, I guess it would have been like summer of '84, because we in early '84 we added a drummer, this guy Fritz Noble, and he actually had hi-hats, so he got the gig. And we met him through a record store called Mr. Records. It was way out like Shoots Road and Page. It was one of the places you could actually get real punk rock stuff. You could get imports. And he joined the band. Within a month, we recorded a cassette in Rob's bedroom, basically two microphones on a stereo, just into the tape deck, one in the room, one for me to sing into, and we sold them. There was a punk rock store called New Values, and we sold that cassette at the store, and people bought it. I mean, someone actually had it online on eBay for sale, and I'm pretty certain it was the one that, based on the letter that was with it, someone from Flipside must have sold it, because it was the letter that Rob wrote when he mailed it to Flipside for a review. It got reviewed in Flipside,
Huh.
which is pretty crazy. Just a cassette recorded in our bedroom, or his bedroom, I should say. And from that, I mentioned KCFV. There was a show called Radio One Faster and Louder. It was on Saturday nights from 8 to midnight. This guy Rob Mayhofer had it, and me and Rob would go up there. We'd bring our records, and we even did the show a couple times, I think, when he had something to do. But he was, he was playing the cassette on the air, so people were hearing our stuff on the radio, before we even played our first show. And he's like, "You guys got to play a show. You got to play a show." So he got us on that Offenders gig. I'm pretty certain he got us on the show because he gave me the guy's number that did the show, and I just called him. And for whatever reason, there was three opening bands, and we weren't first. We were the brand new band, but we ended up, I guess, because we had that cassette. I don't know, but we played third out of four bands. It was pretty weird. And then, like I said, the 4 songs into the Offenders, the cops showed up and shut it down and arrested a bunch of people.
Word.
Yeah, but that just sort of, we replaced. We started playing with Mike Doskasil, the drummer, and like really it was the week after. Our last show was with Naked Ray Gun at a place called Turner's in North St. Louis.
I love
And
that again.
yeah, they're great. And then
One
a
of my
week later, we were in practice with Mike Doskasil, John Corcoran, and I think Bob Zulik was with there the first time. I can't remember if he was at the first practice or not, but he was a guy I skated with, and he was in another band called Isolated Youth at the time as well. Every band had the word youth in their name. And we were skating, and I was like, "Oh wait, yeah, you play guitar." So we wanted to add a second guitarist. I don't remember the conversation of why we wanted to, but for whatever reason, we wanted a second guitarist, and that's what it is. So I was just circling back to the thing about the change. So summer of '84, that Marginal Man record came out. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not. They were a DC band. So Marginal Man, Gray Matter, everything kind of slowed down. And Rob's like, because everything we did was, especially that first cassette, everything was super fast, like straight up hardcore, real hardcore, not chunka hardcore. And and I was like, I don't know, man, everything's got to be fast. But he played these records for me, and then I just ended up being some of my. In fact, I was just listening to Marginal Man today at the skate park. Now that I think about it, but I was like, okay, so there was a shift in the speed and the tempo and the song. Rob was getting better at being a guitar player and a songwriter, and so I think that was really the impetus to change. And it just how long can you call yourself White Ribbon Youth? I mean, sure, I was only I guess I was 20, just turned 21 in '85, so it was time to upgrade the name.
Brad, I wonder if there's going to be the reverse now that everyone's starting to get older.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I wouldn't be surprised. That would no, I haven't can't say I've noticed it, but yeah, I try to avoid the whole like being on stage and talking about how old I am. I mean, I don't need to point out the obvious. I mean, it's pretty clear. Um, and if you know anything about our history, it's like, yeah, I would have to be old.
You switched over to Ultraman. When did you record that black cassette tape that I found on the dark web?
Okay, yeah, well, that was we
It
recorded
started with-
that.
It started with Mr. Yuck.
Yeah, we recorded that, and that was actually Mr. Yuck's actually the first official Ultraman song. That was the first song that we wrote as a new band. But that was recorded in November of '86, and we used the money that. Did we get actual money from that show, or did we just record after that? I can't imagine we got paid for that show. We played a show at Webster University. It was like a fundraising thing for the IRA. Yeah, the guy that did it, he's still around. I can't imagine we got paid for that, but for whatever reason, we somehow had money, and we recorded those songs on that cassette that you found uh, at a studio on South Broadway. I don't know if you remember Hullabaloo. A long time ago, it was like a clothing store.
Yeah.
It was right next door to Hullabaloo. It was Paradise Sound. That's what it was called, Paradise Sound. Yeah, they weren't thrilled. Anytime you went in a studio, especially back then, the engineers were not happy that you were recording punk rock. They were not. They weren't thrilled. They were not happy at all. But that's where we recorded that. And then we spent all our money recording that. We didn't have the money to press it yet, so we just sold it as a cassette. And I think it's 7 songs. Is that right?
I yeah, that sounds right. It was 6 or 7.
Yeah, because the first 7-inch is only 4 songs. We didn't put
It was 6 songs. It was Mr. Yuck, The One, Egg Boy, Retractor Breath, Yipes, and The Game.
so the 7-inch, I'd have to go. The Ones is not on the 7-inch. I know that much.
The
The
self
ones never got released as far as vinyl. And then I don't think we put Rector Breath on the first 7-inch.
No, the first 7-inch was 4 tracks. It was Mr. Yuck, Egg Boy, Yipes, and The Game.
Okay, yeah, so Rector Breath and the Ones were not on the 7-inch. So the songs that are on the first 7-inch come from that recording. It's from that cassette, but we sold that cassette, sold a ton of those things. In fact, I remember we played the first Suicidal show in April of '87, but we didn't play the one in September. And we must have just started selling those cassettes. Yeah, we recorded end of '86, so we would have started selling them in '87. So at the second show, Suicidal show, I don't even think I went in. I just was in line selling cassettes to people in line to Suicidal. I don't think I went into that show. Maybe I did. If I was down there, I probably went in, but yeah, we didn't play that one. But yeah, so that first year we sold a ton of those cassettes. And but when the 7-inch, I don't even remember why we didn't put those other two songs on the 7-inch, I guess space. And the mastering didn't come out as, like, a lot of people complained that the cassette sounded better than the 7-inch, which it probably did. I think the mastering got kind of screwed up. There was a vinyl pressing plant in Arnold, Missouri, and that's where it was pressed. First two 7-inches were both pressed down there. Midwest Recording, I think, was the name of it.
I'm 12 years old and I'm on my skate. I'm flying fast down a steep hill. I'm having fun, but I'm also scared. My time is now, I can't get away.
You're referring to, when you say the second one, are you referring to Destroy All Monsters and Kills All Families?
Kills All Families, yeah. So that's an inside joke. So the first one didn't even have a title. It was just Ultraman.
Ultraman, yeah.
Yeah. And both the photos on that record, I'll mention this too, is the front and back photos are both taken at the Outhouse in Lawrence, Kansas, where we ended up playing more shows there than probably anywhere. And that when the guy did the documentary at one point, when he was putting it together, he said just based on the flyers, he was pretty sure that we had played the Outhouse more than any other band. So even more than any local band.
Yeah, I read an article that you had written in 2013 about the Outhouse.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, the second one, the title, it was from Metallica. Like, do you know about Whoppers Taste Good?
No.
St. Louis band, Whoppers Taste Good.
It sounds like a wonderful band name.
Oh, they're amazing. You need to definitely look them up. I'm sure the stuff's online. It's probably someone's got to have put it on YouTube. But we met those guys. They're all North County guys too. We met them in August of '86. Their whole thing was food core beer metal. So they're basically metal guys that got into punk. And they were great, but they were hilarious, and they always had just, catchphrases and things that we would steal on a regular basis. Just from hanging out with them, we would end up, sort of assimilating their vernacular into ours. They had a huge influence on us in that way. But the Metallica record, Kill 'Em All. So anytime somebody played a lick or something that was heavy or whatever, or it's like, they're killing it all or whatever. They're killing families, and like so somehow that's where the title came from. Destroys all monsters, kills all families. Like they're killing everything. Like if someone was something was killer, it's like they're killing everything. So one of them said they're killing families, and somehow we thought that was hilarious.
So yes, Science Patrol Records is what both of those were released on.
Right. Yeah, that was our label, if you want to call it that. We had to put something on there. And Science Patrol is from Ultraman TV show, so that was the name of the scientific group that Ultraman was, part of. Their Hayata was part of, that turned into Ultraman. So that was the reason for the name, Science Patrol.
Word. I had to get that in there somewhere.
Should be a game of give and take. Should be a game at all. But every time I try, I always seem to fall.
Yeah, both of those 7 inches were great, right? And then in '88 you recorded the first full length Freezing Inside. Tell me a bit about that. That was awesome.
Well, so we actually recorded it in '89. We got signed in '88 in November, and then January '89 is when we recorded that album.
I blame Discogs. Discogs always have
Yeah,
dates wrong.
yeah. I mean, I usually would let stuff like that go, but whatever. Um, yeah, so we actually recorded so we turned around the recording time for that second 7-inch faster. So we had the money from selling the 7-inch. It took forever to finally get released. Obviously, we started selling that in '88. So like the end of '87, first part of '88, we sold the first 7-inch, and then in the summer of '88, we recorded like I don't know, maybe 10 songs, and that's what turned into that second 7-inch. And then those first two 7-inches is essentially how we ended up getting on New Red Archives. It's part of the reason. The fact that we released our own record. We went on a tour on the East Coast, if you want to call it a tour. It was a week long. But we got in the van and booked some dates and did 4 or 5 shows in Maryland and a couple of shows in Boston, one at the Pyramid Club in New York. And the fact that we did that and that we were playing in Lawrence a lot, we'd played Memphis, we did a little bit of traveling. And because of that, we were trying to get on Caroline. So I worked at Street Side Records at the time, and the assistant manager was friends with, through being the buyer for Street Side at that store or whatever, became buddies with the VP of sales at Caroline. So Caroline was really the goal because they were signing a lot of bands, and but they had also been distributing our 7-inches. So when the first review came out for the first 7-inch, they actually sent us a letter and was like, "Hey, we would like to distribute your record." So they were buying our records and selling them. There was only 300 of the first one and 500 of the second one, but they were buying them, and like I think they bought maybe 20 or 30 of them of each. I don't even really remember, but enough. And it sold well, I guess. And we were trying to get on Caroline, and Nicky Garrett ran the warehouse at Caroline Records, and he was the original guitar player for the UK Subs. He owned New Red Archives Records. He was looking for a band from the Midwest because he had just started his own label, and he had a band from the East Coast, California, but he needed a Midwest band. And so the guy from the VP of sales passed on our information in a cassette to Nicky, and he liked it and liked the fact that we had toured and that we put out our own records and sold them. And that's how we got to be on New Red Archives. And then the Freezing Inside was recorded in New York in January of '89 because it was cheaper for him to pay us to drive and put us up in his apartment in New York than it was to record in St. Louis. There was only 2 studios, maybe 3. And it was like, this is 1989. It was like $60 an hour. And he's like, "That's crazy. There's no way, you can come here and record." And so that's what we did. That was cool.
$60 an hour seems really cheap right now.
Well, in 1989, $60 bought a lot more than it does now. I mean, back then gas wasn't even $1 a gallon. It was like 85 cents a gallon.
I vaguely remember that.
What if you would hit $1 a gallon? That was something. I was like, man, $1 a gallon. I remember being in New York. Once you went out west, it was over $1. It was like $1.25, $1.30, and just being shocked like how much gas was. Like, this is crazy. But yeah, I mean, it was essentially $20 an hour to record in New York, and that was a totally weird, crazy situation. Anyway, I don't know if that was in the Discog stuff or anywhere online, but pretty sure it's on our Wikipedia thing. But where we recorded was an advertising agency called Saatchi and Saatchi, which is a huge agency. But the bass player from Kraut and the guy that produced the Kraut record were both engineers there, and they were friends of Nikki's. So that's how we ended up. We basically rolled our gear in after 5 o'clock on a Friday on a when everybody had left for the day, and set up, started recording, like getting sounds and stuff that night. Recorded Saturday, Sunday, mixed on Monday, and then came home on Tuesday.
That's crazy fast.
Yeah. No, actually, I take it back. I think that might have only been 3 days now that I think about it. I think because I did vocals on Sunday morning, worst possible time to do vocals. Like any time before noon is worst time to do anything. But no, actually, now that I think it back, because Tom Lyle produced it. The guy, he was a guitar player in Government Issue, and yeah, he mixed it later by himself. Now that I think about it, so yeah, it was just 3 days. We got sounds on, set up everything Friday night, recorded Saturday, Sunday, loaded out on Monday morning, and drove home.
Word. Yeah, and that album turned out great too. It turned out great. And then what did you say that came out in 89?
89, yeah. So recorded January 89, and then I can't remember what was the holdup, but we played our album release show in July of 89 at a place called First Rock on the Landing. And there's a video of that on YouTube. I've uploaded a few songs, but really the more interesting part of that is really not the video from inside the venue, it's from outside the venue through the window, because that night they told us that if anyone stage dives or slam dances, they're getting thrown out. So it was packed. So there was a tiny, pretty small area in front of the band, in front of the stage anyway. It was packed, so you really couldn't move anyway, so it didn't matter. But people were stage diving. Anytime somebody stage dove, they got booted. So by the end of the show, there was probably 30 or 40, maybe even 50 people in the street hanging out front, watching through the window, because the band where you set up on stage, your back was to the window. It was on Morgan Street, so you're right there in the window on stage. So people were watching. So the video through the window is actually more entertaining than anything else. Just the fact that all those people got kicked out.
I mean, at least you can still hear the music out there, right?
Yeah, yeah, you can definitely hear it right through the window. Yeah. But yeah, and then I think we finally did have the record. I can't remember. I don't think we had the records at the show. I just vaguely remembering that we didn't have them. We had shirts, but we didn't have the record. And so that was July, I want to say 17th or something like that, somewhere in there. And then our tour started August 3rd or 4th. Like we left for tour like 2 weeks later. But yeah.
And toured for a while. Even made it to Europe the next year. Which I want to ask you about this Italian bootleg. Are you aware of?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was
Roma alla Forte Presentation.
Yeah, I think that venue's still there. It was fairly famous for punk rock shows in the 80s. I'm sure you could probably find plenty of bootlegs recorded there. So, well, that all, I forget, maybe someone emailed it to me, or I don't know, maybe I found it, but somebody was selling that on eBay, the cassette, and for like a lot of money, like the actual cassette that was recorded from the board that night. And so I didn't speak Italian, obviously, but there was a guy that was a professor at SLU from Italy, and he skated, and that's how I'd met him. So I contacted him, was like, hey, can you communicate with this guy? And like, I don't I don't want the actual whatever. I don't need it. I just need the recording. I need a digital version of this. And can you can you talk to this guy for me? And he did, and the guy was totally cool with it. Yeah, he like sent me a digital version of it. And it took me forever to, I think Gabe, our drummer, finally sorted out how to get the files to where I could post them on YouTube. So that it's on YouTube. That's on my channel on YouTube.
Word. I I just came across it earlier today, so I haven't been able to hunt that one down. Like I didn't find it on my dark web search initially, so I was like, it
Yeah.
might not be out there.
Yeah, I mean it's like I said, the whole show is posted on my YouTube channel. I mean, it might be somewhere else too, but it's on mine. And I think I just put a bunch of pictures from the tour on it, so as you're watching the video, you're just seeing photos from the tour. And I remember that show very very clearly because it was the day after the most memorable show of that tour, which was in Yugoslavia. So this was in 1990. So Yugoslavia was still Yugoslavia. It hadn't split up yet. There were tanks everywhere when we drove through there from Austria into Yugoslavia. So something was definitely up. Or maybe there were always tanks just randomly on the road in Yugoslavia. I don't know. But it was a little small town that I can't pronounce. I did finally find it years ago and found the venue. But we got there like the day before. So we drove into town. We were on tour with Sam I Am. So we had like a Mercedes like Sprinter van and a Volkswagen bus. And we went rolling through, and I guess they knew it was us because it had the big D on the back for Germany. And the guy was chasing us down the street, the promoter. So we were there a day early. Everyone in town knew who we were. Everyone was like giving us free food, free, like it was just great. Like everyone was super stoked that we were there. Like the entire town was like happy. And um if you look around online, James from Sam I Am actually did he write a book or maybe he just posted it all online? Either way, um he wrote extensively about what happened to him. Um he and Jason, the singer for Sam I Am, had just been hanging out with some locals drinking some sort of clear grain alcohol and just getting completely hammered. And Jason picked James up and just sort of dropped him over his shoulder. He landed on his shoulder and just like totally messed it up. Like he couldn't play guitar. He couldn't play for like 2 shows, maybe 3. Um, but that show was amazing because it was supposed to be in this giant empty swimming pool at this like community thing. I'm sure a Soviet built. I mean, this pool was old, but it rained. So the show had to be moved inside a room that was maybe would hold maybe 50 people. And there was, several hundred people there, like just all crammed in that room and like outside the room looking in the windows and the door. And it was raining. So that was that was pretty messed up as far as comfort went. But yeah, people all just they were fired up. Like that was amazing. But anyway, Rome was the next night. We actually stopped playing, packed everything up, and drove to Rome because it was a long drive to get to Rome for the next night. And so we had no money. So when you exchange money to dinar in Yugoslavia, that's it. You're stuck with it. And it was a Saturday too, so none of the banks were open anyway. There was no way to exchange money. So all I had was American dollars and dinars and I probably had some German marks too, but no lira. And so yeah, we were just kind of stuck at that venue. Like I'm in Rome, the Colosseum, didn't see any of it. I think we drove past it on the way out of town. But that show was outside at that fort on a pretty good sized stage, if I remember right. But it was funny listening to the tape because I'd actually remembered saying some of the things I said in between songs. I was like, oh yeah, I totally remember saying that. But yeah, I was Italy was interesting. That show actually happened. The other 2 shows ended up not happening. Like we just hung out in the squat. They were all squats, like that fort, whatever it's called, was a squat. We played a lot of squats, but these squats were crazy because you wouldn't know they were a squat. Like they had power, water, like it was. It did not seem like an abandoned building that had been taken over. It was pretty crazy.
Word, word. That's awesome. That's awesome. Tell me about Non-Existent, your next album that came out. Was it I don't know if it was 1990 or not, because
It was 1990. Yeah.
okay.
So and we always had lineup changes too. So Freezing Inside was Mike Story on second guitar. After the tour, we did a West Coast tour with Whoppers Taste Good in the summer of '89. During, like in between, we did like Texas, California, Utah. We ended up in Lawrence, and then we had like a week or so maybe off, maybe 2 weeks, and then we had a CBGB's hardcore matinee show booked, and we were booked by this guy named Johnny Stiff out of Brooklyn, and that's a whole thing too. We've been trying to get him to book us since like '87, and he was adamant that unless we had vinyl out, don't go on tour. That's when I ended up booking our own tour in '88. And I mean, he was probably right. But then when we got signed into Internet Archives, he agreed to finally book us. So he booked the West Coast tour for us. And then, but he wouldn't book us at CBGB's. He was like, he goes, he maybe had a beef with someone there, or he couldn't book a show there. I don't know. They wouldn't take his band. I don't know what the deal was. So Nikki got us a show at CB's, and Johnny Stiff got us booked in Cincinnati. It's supposed to be called Bogarts in Cincinnati. You ever been there? It's like a Mississippi Nights basically of Cincinnati, and it's still there. I saw the Damned there a few years ago. A big venue. I don't know how. When that was, well, we had played there earlier with Life Sentence earlier in the year, so we did a lot of weekend gigs. We had played with Life Sentence from Chicago in like March of '89. Anyway, so we had 3 shows, the last being CBGB's, and that was pretty much going to be the end of the tour. You know, so it was Cincinnati, Charlottesville, West Virginia, and then CB's. So we were in Cincinnati. Somebody came up to me, it was like that worked there, was like, "Hey, your booking agent, wants to talk to you." I'm like, "This is weird." So I go in the office, because there's no cell phone, and every interview has to be at some point, every documentary now, someone has to say there were no cell phones. But he was asking me all these weird questions, like asking about our backline, like asking like what kind of drums our drummer had, what kind of cabinets, what kind of heads, like it's like these are some weird questions for him to be asking me at this point. It's like you've already booked a bunch of shows. Like, why do you suddenly care? Well, he was sorting out if we were good enough to provide backline for the UK subs. So the band that had been touring with them, unfortunately, none of them got killed or hurt, as far as I know, badly anyway. They flipped their van in Texas when they were on tour with the UK subs, and so they needed another band because they had to go home. And so they offered us the opening slot for UK subs. So of course, Nikki wasn't playing guitar with them then, but it was just kind of coincidental, dismissed as a coincidence, as I say, that we ended up on a UK subs tour, um, Southeast, East Coast, Canada. So we were on tour. We basically we played the CB show, drove straight back home, had a day to like take a nap and pack up and leave the next day for Memphis to tour with the subs. And so yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but but that happened. So oh yeah, Mike's story, that's what it was. So after that, Mike quit. Like when we got home, unloaded the van, he's like, I'm quitting. He just quit. He quit. He'd had enough of us. Um was like, all right. So we ended up with there was another guy in between, but we never recorded with him. So we started basically getting songs together to record the next album that fall of '89 when we came home from that tour and early part of 1990. And Nicky Garrett actually wrote us a song. That song Messages, it's on Non-Existence. He wrote the music for that. I wrote the lyrics. And we went to San Francisco this time. Again, it was still cheaper to give us money. I think he sent us like $500 to drive out there and back. And we played a show at Gilman Street with MTC while we were there. We were there for like 2 weeks just because of the show. Like we wrapped up the album, and Nikki had just moved from New York to LA. So to get there, we went and stayed with a friend in Dallas. We played a show in Tucson, and we stayed with this. This is how things were then. Maybe it still is this way, but there was a band called G Wiz that Nikki had put on a compilation, Hardcore Breakout, for Newer Archives. And he gave me the number of this guy. And I don't think I called him before we left St. Louis, or maybe I did. I don't, I really think I was so dumb that I called him like the day of. Like, hey, by the way, this is Tim from Ultraman. We have a show in Tucson. Can we stay at your place? He had like a studio apartment. So we show up at like 4 a.m. at his house. But that dude was super cool. That's a lot of that video is on my YouTube thing too. That dude was great. Wayne from G Wiz. But we played a show in Tucson. But Nicky had just moved to LA. So we drove from Tucson to LA after playing that show and picked him up at his brand new apartment in Hollywood, and then drove to San Francisco. And we stayed most of the time with James and Sam Am, and we stayed a couple nights at the bass player from Sam Am was roommates with Matt from at the time MDC and Op Ivy, but Matt from Rancid. We stayed at his apartment a couple nights too. But anyway, we were there for like 2 weeks. We were same deal. We went on a Friday. I think that was what I was confusing the '89 with. So that was a 4-day thing. We went on a Friday, set everything up, recorded Saturday, Sunday, and mixed on Monday. So that whole record was done in 4 days. So yeah. And that was Peter Miller Studios. I think that guy might still be around, but yeah, that was pretty cool. And then I think we stayed another. I guess the show we played with MDC was like the next weekend, something like that. But yeah, and then we just got in the van and drove home. We made that drive home in one shot. That was crazy.
Rotated, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but I just probably did most of driving because I was a control freak, and also knew I could stay awake, whether I could or not. I believed it was just maybe too nervous to let anyone else drive for any length of time. I think we stopped briefly at a rest area in Arizona and maybe slept for a couple hours, and then just kept driving and made it back. Like we left at like noon. That show must have been a Saturday because we were like a noon on a Sunday for some reason. I remember that. Left like noon on a Sunday, San Francisco time. We got home Monday evening, like right around dusk. That was a long drive.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
In a van that probably shouldn't been on the road in the first place, like a 1978 Dodge van.
Word.
I'm getting all twisted up. Inside my head I see the reason for the last time. The reason is has to be. I'm getting all twisted up. Inside my head I see the reason for the last time. The reason is has to be. The reason for the last time.
There was quite the gap between the release of Non-Existent and The Constant Weight of Zero.
Well, yeah, I mean, when the band breaks up, it's hard to put out a record. So
Yeah, I'm assuming so.
it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
The band Beanies put out two releases while they were broke up.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It's just we didn't. Yeah, so when we came back from the second European tour, that's when, there was a vote. And I voted no, by the way. Me and John, the bass player, different John than the one that's on the albums, but yeah, that was a crazy thing too. John Corcoran was in the band from the beginning, but he was also in a band called Voice of God. And there was some sort of conflict with one of their shows and our shows. We had a show in Alabama. I was like, man, we can't keep doing this. This is not gonna, So we ended up replacing him with this guy named he went by John. Doesn't like having his real name out there in the real world, but so I won't mention it. But anyway, uh he did the tour with us, the second tour, but his first show, we always did this to people that were new in the band. Like um Matt Smith's first show was like 2 weeks after he started playing with us, and that was with Faith No More at Mississippi Nights. Mark Denizak joined the band like maybe 2 weeks, maybe less, before our date with the Exploited at Mississippi Nights in '88. And then John, his first show with us wasn't even in St. Louis. It was in DC at DC Space, where the crowd was predominantly people in bands in DC. So it was like Fugazi, Gray Matter, uh, who else?
No,
Jabach.
no pressure on that guy at all.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's like 50 people there, and they're just all in Discord bands. So yeah, he had
Here's
like,
all your idols growing up. Don't mess
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. Here you go. Here's your first show with us, in DC. But anyway, so yeah, he voted no too. Me and him voted no to break up when we got back from that tour. It's like we've come this far. What are we quitting for? But yeah, then we just did reunion shows during the '90s, and then like a 10-year anniversary show in '96, and we ended up playing with Rancid actually a week later, because the booking agent for Rancid had called me, and she's like, "Who's a good band, local band to open for Rancid?" I was like, I think Ultraman would be that band." And she's like, "What?" Like, "Yeah, we're doing a show a week before, so don't mention us." I didn't, for some reason in my head, I was like, well, if people know we're playing the next week with Rancid, they won't go to the show. That was dumb, but I was like, just put us as unannounced or whatever, TBA, whatever. But yeah, we ended up playing with them a week later, so that was pretty cool. Um, but that show made me, when I first started, like my brain started going, maybe we should do this again. Those guys were not, because they had their other band Bent still at the time. Um, yeah, they weren't interested in doing it, because and at the time I was like, let's do this. Let's start writing new songs again. Because we had like 500 people at that show. I was like, man, if we can still draw that many people, maybe we should still do this now. They didn't see it that way, but so it took me another 3 years to finally pull the trigger and do it and reform the band. Which technically, I guess I didn't reform it. I just formed a new band. If I could have done that in '91, I probably would have, if I'd had the people and the resources to do it. Although at the time there was a huge part of me that was actually relieved it was over. So there was that. Maybe I wouldn't have done it even if I'd had the chance. But yeah. So anyway, '99, put together a new lineup for Ultraman. I asked Rob to do it, and he declined. He did think about it. At least he said he did anyway. But he did come back in 2001. So he was actually, Rob Wagner was in the band again from 91, from 2001 to 2015. And but anyway, yeah. So the the new lineup's been around much longer than the original. That's for sure. We're 25 years at this point. So yeah, but yeah, and Constant Way to Zero came out 2004, so 20 years since our last record. And it was also on New Red Archives. We'd recorded stuff earlier, and for whatever reason, Nikki was like, not really into it, not interested. I don't know if it was just in general he didn't think it was worth putting out, or just wasn't into putting anything out at the time. But by 2004, I sent him stuff we recorded in, well, actually 2003. We recorded stuff in like early 2003, a new batch of songs. I sent him those. He's like, "Oh, I really like these. Let's do this. Let's do another record." And actually, I actually was going through a box of stuff a few years ago and found the letter. I think he lost my email address or my phone number, and he just wrote me a letter. I have the letter. It's like, "Hey, let's do this." I was like, "All right." Um, but for whatever reason, yeah, he was down to do a third album, so that worked out.
And that's a great album too. That's
Well,
one of my favorites, even though this new album is fucking super badass and I really dig it. But The Constant Way to Zero was a fucking great album.
well, thanks. Yeah, like I said, it was the a collection of songs we had recorded starting in the end of '99. So yeah, like because that was my thing. I didn't want to just my intention was not to just play Ultraman's old Ultraman songs over and over again. I wanted to write new stuff. And so I think I was actually talking to Bob about this the other day. And I can't remember which song it was, which came first, but it might have been Drawn. But anyway, the first show we did, and that was a crazy thing too. I don't know why I did that. Um, Basically booked a show before we even had the first practice. Like we had no idea how this was going to work out or sound, and yeah, booked a show at Creepy Crawl into February before we even had our first practice. But 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 I think we played a new song, maybe two in that set. The rest of it was all old stuff, obviously, but yeah, so we were writing new stuff right away. I mean, that was my point. I wanted to do new stuff. I didn't want to just. I had no intention of. I mean, I was sick of most of the songs anyway. I mean, in the the couple of years in, I was like deleting songs from the set list and let's add new songs. You know, it was by 91 that set list looked a lot different than it did in 1998. That's for sure. Um, so um, but anyway, yeah, there's three different sessions I think that make up the Constant Way to Zero.
Word.
And then if you listen, if you wait, there's a gap at the very end. There's five songs from a band I did in between lineups.
I was curious about that. What's up with and what is it? What the Cleopatra
Chrissy Fit.
release of 2013, Chrissy Fit?
It's Chrissy Fit. Yeah, it's so that band existed for 6 months from I want to say fall of '92 to like spring of '93, and that band was all former members of Ultraman at one time or another. Although, other than myself, none of them had played in the band at the same time as the other. So it was John on bass. He was in every band I did in between, and he was the bass player in Ultraman up until 2015 when he left, when Rob left. But so it was Mike Doskasil, Mike Story, and John, and we had those are the only songs. I think we might have had one other song that didn't get recorded. We did a couple of covers when we played two shows. We did a Dead Boys cover and a Jim Carroll band, Friends Who Died. I mean, I wish I had a recording of that. We actually did a really good version of that. But we recorded that in John lived in a studio apartment on the Clede, and in the basement he had access to the basement, and he set up a recording studio and recorded those songs in that studio. But that band came into existence because it'd been about a year since Ultraman had ended. Yeah, it makes sense. Like fall of '92, so that makes sense. And I was just talking to John one day, and I was like, man, I wonder what happened to Mike Doskasil. Like, because I knew he had moved to Phoenix, he had moved to Seattle, and I was like, we were just, hypothetically thinking, if Mike was around, I would totally start a band with him. I would totally be in a band with Mike again. And that's the whole backstory. I mean, we don't need to go into that, but the fact that I said I'd be in a band with Mike again is a there's a lot to that. to to point out how great of a drummer he is. He had a lot of baggage, let's say. But we always got along. I always got along with the guy, even when he was completely out of his mind. I always got along with him. But I just, for whatever reason, called his house, his parents' house, and he answered. And I was like, "This is crazy." I was just calling to see if they would tell me where you were. I was just curious. And he answered the phone, and I was like, "He's like, yeah, I'm back here, man." He was back for a specific reason, and didn't really work out. But anyway, at least not till much later, unfortunately for him probably, and everyone that knew him. But anyway, he's like, "Yeah, man, the first thing out of my mouth was, 'Do you have your drums with you?'" He's like, he was like, "Of course I do." And so yeah, that was the beginning of that band. That's how that all started. Yeah, but then it just kind of imploded. He bailed, after 2 shows, and that was that. I think he probably sold his drums not long after that, and things
Well,
got
they were great
messed up.
5 tracks. They were great.
Yeah, yeah, they worked out well. And even that band, I didn't think sounded like Ultraman. Everything I did in between, everybody always said it sounded like Ultraman. I was like, well, it is my voice, so yeah, I'll give you that. But I didn't think Prissy Fit sounded like Ultraman. I really didn't think the Aggravations sounded like Ultraman. Obsolete Man, the last one I did right before Reforming, did, and specifically kind of on purpose. I actually was playing with a drummer that played like Mark Denizak, so I was kind of shooting for that. I mean, that one kind of did, but the first two didn't sound anything like Ultraman as far as I was concerned. But anyway, yeah. So I had those recordings, and I was like, let's just add these to the end of the CD. Let's just stick them on there. Like, why not? Everybody in the band was in Ultraman at one point or another, so they might as well be on there.
Yeah, it works out. It works out. In 2012, you did a split with Dot Dash.
Yeah, so that happened essentially because of the first European tour of Sam I Am. This guy Hugo was in a band called Parkinson Square, and we played a show with them with Sam I Am in Lyon, where he was from at the time. And then he came with us because he was friends with Sam I Am anyway. He had been to the States and hung out in San Francisco and met James when he was in Social Unrest. And anyway, he just contacted me. We stayed in touch through Facebook or whatnot. And he's like, yeah, man, let's do because we recorded some songs in 2010. That's what's on that record that came out in 2012. And we had them. I was like, yeah, man, let's use these 3 songs for that, for the split 10-inch. There's 300 of those, by the way. But, and then we got them when we played with Naked Ray Gun. They they finally showed up in the mail like maybe a week or so before that show, and we sold most of them at that show, the copies that we had.
And their new album is really good.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's a long time coming. I mean, the problem was just the way things are structured now with time constraints and whatnot. So every time we would start working on new songs, we'd get a show. So now we got to work on the set. So it was an either or proposition. It was either work on the set or work on new songs. So we would have to work on the set, and we had demo versions of a lot of the songs that are on that record. Um, since like 2013, some of them were 2015, maybe 2018, maybe. Anyway, we had demo versions of some of the songs that are on it. Some of the songs obviously are some of the songs on a record had never even been played live before. Like, so they're real new.
So you're saying you've been demoing for this for 11 years?
Pretty much. And then a handful of those songs, the ones that Timo Saban wrote, those were like within the last 3 or 4 years. Some of those we'd been playing live. I think maybe one of his that he wrote we had never played live before uh, until the record release show. Uh, I think one of them we played at the when Fubar closed or their official last show. We played that. We might have played a couple of them at that show too, but some of them had never been played live. But yeah, it the pandemic, same old story of tons of bands. I'm sure it just opened up the opportunity. We weren't going to be getting any shows, obviously, so we had time to focus and put the record together and record it and get it done, get it out there. And then we got it recorded. It actually sat around. Gabe just didn't have the time to mix it, and decided to have Jay Robbins from Government Issue Jawbox mix it for us. So that worked out. So it's kind of full circle of Government Issue. Tom Lyle produced the first album and mixed it, and Jay Robbins played bass in Government Issue. He mixed it for us. So
Well,
full
that's awesome.
circle.
Yeah, and it's a great album. It's a great album.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, it's at this point I've heard it so many times. Like, is it great? Is this any good?
Well, I mean, I've only had a couple weeks of exposure to it, and I
Yeah.
dig it. It's been in my rotation.
Well, that's cool. That's good to know. Yeah. So yeah, it's out there. So be sure to go get it. It's Rad Girlfriend Records. Just you put a link in the description, as the kids say on YouTube.
Whoa, yeah, yeah. It's also, don't you have it up on the Bandcamp? Hold on a second.
Yeah, there's a Rad Girlfriend Bandcamp where you can get it there, and then there's the Rad Girlfriend website as well. And if you want our old stuff, Ultraman has a Bandcamp too. It's on there. Our old stuff. I don't think the first two 7 inches are on there. You have to go find those.